So, please, what actually got you into metal music at first place? When do you recall hearing metal for the first time?
It was kind of accidental. I was always kind of a self-starter, and when I was in grade school, I had asked my father for some work at his office and permission to deliver newspapers. And this was back in like the 1970s, and we had it was called Columbia Record House. It was a business from Columbia Records where you would pay 1 penny and you could pick 12 full-length LPs for that 1 penny. But then you had to buy another 12 over the ensuing year, everything that followed. So it was really like a half-price deal from what retail was. And I didn't know what I was getting. I mean, I looked in the newspaper and it said, oh, heavy blues, heavy rock, heavy. That's all I ordered. So I ended up with like the first 4 Black Sabbath records.
Okay.
Lou Reed, Uriah Heep, I mean, all the stuff that had that kind of vibe to it. So it was my introduction, and it was accidental because I just went for something that was different, and I don't know why. I mean, I probably had heard Led Zeppelin to this point, or the Stones, or maybe some Black Sabbath, but not to the point where you would today, because it was just, it was radio back then. It was and primarily AM radio, not even FM. So an unusual way to get started, but that's how it happened.
So how did you ended up forming a band then? What's the story behind that? And was Overkill your like first proper band?
I suppose that's my first proper band. I think once I ordered all of those records we just talked about, I mean, I took it further. I mean, prior to that, there was Beatles records around my house. My mother was a singer. She cut a few records. My father was an attorney, but he liked outlaw country. I would take the broomstick and play air guitar. So by the time I got 13, I already had these records, and he took it a step further, my dad, and he bought me a Beatle bass, the original Hofner. It's the violin bass that Paul McCartney used in most of the early Beatles stuff. And before I knew it, I mean, you're a bass player, and you're 13, you learn the E string, you got a gig. You know what I mean? Somebody's going to take it because there's not that many bass players. So that's how that started for me. And it was just grade school fun with friends. And then that rolls into high school and then rolls into the university. And by the time I'm in the university, I'm messing around with the bass guitar, taking courses for some, not really music, more communications. And I hooked up with a guy who eventually he and I and Dee Dee and Rat Skates started the first version of Overkill. We had met them through a newspaper, and that was Overkill. And I suppose that would be the first proper band. And that was back in 1980, when I was in college.
So where did you originally come up playing the type of music that you're playing? Because obviously those bands that you mentioned were way different than what you started to do.
It was a blend. I mean, between that time when I was delivering newspapers and filing papers at my father's office, I got into punk, and as the punk stuff came along, I mean, I was in high school and the Ramones released Road to Ruin, Rocket to Russia, Ramones, the Dead Boys had come out. There was a great New York punk scene, New York Dolls, Heartbreakers, Blondie. Blondie was an underground band before they were a hip hop band. And you take that and you start mixing it with metal, it starts becoming something a little bit more aggressive.
Yeah.
And around the same time all this is happening, I'm working in a music store that sells records. The place was called Sam Goody, and you'd always get the new releases. I mean, that one particular year we got the Michael Jackson Thriller, I think. We got AC/DC's Back in Black and British Steel by Priest. So it was like, I mean, it was some fucking cool stereo equipment. You could blast this shit on. So you have the Ramones playing over here and have fucking you know, Hell Bent for Leather playing over here, or Killing Machine rather. So it was just a unique time for me. It all just came together like a blend, and I think that that's where the thrash element came from.
So how did you ended up becoming a vocalist? Was it just that you didn't have a vocalist and you needed to have somebody to handle it, like the basic story, or how did it happen?
Well, you know, I mean, when you're young, you know what the vocalist is? He doesn't have to be good. He just has to have the biggest balls, because it's the most embarrassing thing, because everybody else hides behind him. They always put him up front.
Yeah.
But as I told you earlier, my mother always sang. I mean, she was one of nine sisters. And I never had a fear of singing, because it was always around my house. I remember her singing to me before I remember her talking to me. You know, one of the last things I remember before she passed or before she got ill was her singing. So to me, it was just natural. Everybody sings, but obviously everybody doesn't. And I remember my grandparents loved them, all the girls standing around the fireplace on a Sunday, and they would sing and harmonize, you know, and do all this great stuff. And my mother took it further. I mean, she was like, she went on tour. She sang with Mitch Miller, who was a great big band leader. You know, and she quit that to have me, you know, so I suppose I'm just carrying it on, you know, in some kind of a strange way. So when it came to my first singing audition, it was in college. I met the guy who we started Overkill with, a guy named Rob Pasaric. And he said, "Hey man, do you sing?" I said, "Well, I do a couple of tunes in the band I was in. You know, I did some Lou Reed, and I think I did Deep Purple Hush." He goes, "Oh, well," I said, "I'm a bass player." He said, "Oh, come down. We need a bass player." So I went down. There was a guy playing bass already. And I said, "Oh, I must be the next audition, you know?" And no, that was the singer. They said, could you sing? We got a bass player." And I was like, "I could do this. This is easy." And so I got the gig on like 3 Priest songs, a couple of AC/DC songs. And, you know, from right there, I never looked back.
I was going to ask you next that were there like some specific covers that you recall playing with Overkill when you started, or were you like immediately trying to make your own music together, or how did that happen?
It was covers. And it wasn't, you know, there was some punk covers. We did do some Dead Boys. We did Sonic Reducer by the Dead Boys. We did a lot of Priest. We did a lot of AC/DC. The AC/DC and the Priest kind of fit my voice. You know, Maiden started coming around, and, you know, the Paul Di'Anno stuff I could handle. Not as good with the Bruce stuff. You know, I mean, AC/DC, the Bon Scott stuff, I mean, it was right in my wheelhouse. It was like pitching me a home run pitch, you know, so it was never a hard thing for me, you know, and I never, you know, I was never afraid to stand there and talk to people. And I suppose you have to not be afraid to make a fool of yourself, because it's possible you do. So I just never had that problem.
So when you started doing the covers, were you sort of first like mimicking the vocalist before you were like sort of settling into your own sound, or what kind of memories do you have from that?
No, not necessarily. I'm kind of a one-trick pony. I could only do one thing. What I'm saying about the Priest and the AC/DCs, they fit my voice because I could get it out of my mouth, not because I could sing it like Halford or sing it like, you know, I would try to hit those notes, of course, but I mean, nobody could sing like him. Here, wait, I got some living proof here. There you go. That's my mother's 8x10 photo.
Okay.
When she sang with Mitch Miller. That used to hang in the Copacabana in New York City. So, I mean, cool. I suppose somewhere in here I'm a pedigree for this.
So what kind of like memories do you have when it comes to the voice in the early days? Were you losing it like all the time when you're like pushing yourself too much? And did it take like a long time to figure out the right technique so you could handle the rehearsals, what you were doing?
Boy, that's a great point. It's I did. I lost my voice all the time because, you know, the adrenaline, the excitement when you get a gig, you know, and you hurt yourself. You know what I mean?
And I guess you also had the punk mentality within you as well, in a way.
Yes. So it was a combination of both, and the aggression behind the punk and the musicality and push behind singers like Halford or Dickinson or Klaus or, you know, on and on. You know, you could do the punk stuff. I mean, I could do that stuff in my sleep. That was never a fucking problem. But try doing, you know, the Sex Pistols and then going into Judas Priest. It's a tough transition. So eventually what ended up happening was, you know, as Overkill developed and we had done the first record, we toured. And it was '86 after the record, and we toured with Slayer over through the US, and then we toured with Anthrax and Agent Steel through Europe. It was called the US Speed Metal Attack. But when I got home, my voice was shot, and I developed what was called polyps on my vocal cords.
Okay.
You know, two little abrasions between the cords from singing incorrectly. So I forget who told me, but they gave me the name of a guy, and this guy straightened me right the fuck out. You know, he just taught me how to use the chords, how to keep my tonality, but sing correctly. And I've passed his name on to people for decades since. I mean, I just got a thank you from Life of Agony, and was told, hey, you know, that vocal coach turned everything around for me. You know, back in when we toured with you back in, I guess it was probably '88 or something, and we took him on the road for like 10 shows. So yeah, that's how it worked for me. Yeah.
I was going to ask you next about the first proper tour that you did with Overkill. What kind of like memories you have, like vocal wise? Was it like a struggle from show to show, or what kind of memories do you have?
Well, the first proper tour was the US Speed Metal Attack. So there was 3 bands. Anthrax was the headline. We were in the center. It's really one of the first tours of that nature that went to Europe, of that level and that nature of like a thrash metal type tour.
Yeah.
And Agent Steel opened the show, and I never remember us playing for more than an hour, which was pretty good, you know, because you could kind of walk into it. I don't even think we played an hour. I think we probably played 40 minutes because there's a tape. It's actually VHS from Bochum, Germany, in a club called Zesha, that says US Speed Metal Attack, and we only do 6 songs. So I mean, that's probably 40 minutes, I would think. So that I didn't really lose it there. I lost it the moment we came back, and the next US tour with Slayer, we were doing like, I don't know, maybe an hour or something. Less days off. I don't really remember, but it was, I hurt my voice there a lot. And I can always tell the difference between the Field of Fire vocals, and between that record and Taking Over, I went to the vocal coach. So the vocals on Taking Over to me are a lot cleaner, a lot more well presented, but it took me a while to get everything together. I don't think I came together till 2 records after that.
So was that also the point when you started doing like vocal warm-ups before the show, or are you like an old school guy that you just go up on stage and perform? How has that like evolved during the years?
Well, I kept those original tapes that I took from the vocal coach. The guy's name is Don Lawrence. I mean, the guy's done a lot of people. He's done, you know, Tony Harnell from TNT. He's done Dee Schneider. Hetfield went to him. I mean, the guy's like, you know, you'd never believe he's a metal guy when you're going la 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 la. You know what I mean? But he's done a lot of people. I kept those tapes and that warm-ups. I don't know if it's psychological to this point, because I've always believed that the vocal cords are a muscle like anything else. And I've always had a decent fitness about myself. So I'm always better when I'm singing, but I still do warm up, you know, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I drop a couple of anti-inflammatories, which keeps the cords from getting swollen. And I can always sing. We never cancel shows because of my voice. So not that I remember anyway. Other things, not my voice.
So are there like some certain foods or drinks that you wouldn't rather have before the show, that you feel that they affect your vocal cords somehow?
No, I don't. I think that a big part of singing is psychological. It's what we talked about earlier. It's about not being afraid to make a fool of yourself sometimes.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, I know guys that are so fucking careful. It's like, oh my God, I can only have antioxidants and I need tea and I need the licorice and I have to have a scarf around my neck even in the summer. I'm like, fuck this. If I start thinking about this, I'm gonna end up being this fucking guy. And he breaks down every 3 fucking shows. You know what I mean? I mean, I'm riding my motorcycle in the fucking winter. I got my shirts open. I could give a shit, and that's really, I think, part of the attitude that's in our music, but also in my presentation. It's
Yeah.
like, it's not fuck you, I hate you. It's like, fuck that. I'm not fucking doing that. I'm doing what I want to do.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I've always enjoyed about this whole thing in general is that you live your life as your own fucking captain. You don't have to listen to anybody else. So, and probably the same for you doing this within the scene. I could see all those CDs behind you. You're
Yeah.
having
Yeah.
a good fucking time over there.
Yeah, for sure. I've been a journalist for 20 years, so yeah. And I've always been the editor in chief, so this is like small fortune that ends up here, and most goes somewhere else to journalists. So, yep.
I talked to a guy who was a journalist once, and I said, well, what drove you to do it? He goes, I never, ever could have afforded all the music I want.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah. That has helped, of course, and being like a show junkie, that helps also a lot with that. So you'd have to pay like a lot of money to go to see shows. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And you also help it out. It's great. So
Yeah. So obviously, like you already mentioned, you have released a lot of albums with Overkill. But are there like some certain albums that stands out for you as a vocalist that you feel that you have sort of like taken a big step up as a singer?
Well, yes.
You already mentioned one, but
It came later. It came later on in my career. And I said I never canceled the show because of my vocals, but I started having problems with my lungs because I was living that I don't give a shit all the way to 1 foot in the grave kind of mentality.
yeah.
And I smoked Marlboros since I was, 16.
Okay.
And I had reached the age of 52, and it wasn't necessarily affecting my voice, or I at least didn't think so, but for sure was affecting my lungs by then. So if it's affecting my lungs, it's obviously affecting my singing. And it knocked me out at one of the shows. I was in Germany, and my lungs I just was full. I had pneumonia, and
Ah,
I ended up in a hospital, and the woman that was, caring for me, the head of that department, was the lung department, was just awesome. She just told me that it's got to be a change, or this is going to recur again and again and again. It was only the first time anything that happened like this. So I just started over, and that's, I picked up a vape pen, got rid of the Marlboros. My voice changed instantly on the next record. It was an instant change. I had more power. I had more tonality. My lows were rounder, where normally everything on the high end I could reach, but my lows were like rubbery. They were like, blah, 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 blah. But I could round out the lows in the bottom of my voice. And that's probably on the record White Devil Armory. But I noticed it came around even more so on a record called The Grinding Wheel in 2017. And even more so on this record, Scorched. I'm hitting higher highs and singing lower lows and not having any trouble with anything. I'm not avoiding anything that I think I can't sing. I can do more things now vocally than I did when I smoked and in my early days.
so you feel also a little bit more confident as a singer then as well?
Oh, sure. I still don't care what people think about, my voice. It's still, I still have that in me that, listen, if you don't like what I just did, that's fine. You do better. And most people will never take the stage and the mic. It's like, no, thanks.
Yeah. Yep.
So there's something really good to have, I suppose, that principle or attitude within my personality, because, it only helps me move forward. I try to be a better singer all the time. I mean, I've never thought of this band as being done. I always think of this band as being something that is relevant in the current day, and I think that that's an important mentality. So I try to make it better from record to record, and in some cases actually succeed in that.
So do you feel that your lung capacity has sort of like improved after like quitting smoking and changing it to vaping?
Yeah, it has improved. I mean, you can't stop. You can't stop the gray hairs. You can't stop the age. I have more time behind me than I have in front of me, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
But the idea is to use the time, especially the present, to its maximum capacity. So if I was still smoking, there's no way I'd be singing. That's as simple as it is. This is a 10-year experience right now for me. That there's been no cigarettes in my hand or my mouth, no weed. I haven't smoked weed since college. So that doesn't go into me anymore. So I think that I'm at the best I could possibly be at this point in my life.
So obviously you already mentioned the upcoming album Scorch, which will be out on April 14th via Nuclear Blast. So are there like some specific tracks on the album that you are like most proud of vocal wise? And were there like some certain things that you tried out, like new things on the album vocally?
One of the new things is, and it's just a very simple change. I don't know how close you follow the band, but Dee Verney's been singing for, he's always been doing background vocals, but he's been singing lead now for probably 20 years. He's had side projects. One of his last bands is called the Dee Verney and the Cadillac Band. It's kind of he's got horns. It's kind of rockabilly meets big band kind of stuff. And he's the lead singer in this, And I always think to myself, it's a fucking waste to have a guy who can do something like that just sitting there, And I'm like, let's do some harmonies. And that's what I said to him this time. Let's do a little Steven Tyler, Joe Perry, you know what I mean? Little Mick and Keith. And he was up for it. So in Bag of Bones, we dropped some harmonies in there. I usually support my own voice. I'll do a high, I'll do a low, and I'll mix them together in some places. Okay. But this is Dee and myself singing the harmonies. The other one is a song called Fever, which was a unique tuning to start. It started off with a very mellow ballad-esque like thing, but we took the E string and tuned it down to A. So when the heavy chords came in, it filled the room and just knocked glasses off the table. It was vibrating with such depth and such low end. So the contrast between that very mellow part and those heavy parts were huge for me. And I was having the hardest fucking time trying to express myself in the mellow parts. And I finally said, just fuck it. I stood up and I just opened up my mouth instead of trying to manipulate the notes. I just opened my mouth and let it come out with whatever was happening, and it's kind of weird. It almost came out like an Ozzy type thing. But I was like, well, that actually works. So that was probably the hardest thing and the one I'm most proud of. But to this day, I still prefer singing in standard tuning, which is, 440 or an E, where a lot of guys my age they'll knock everything down to D, so it's easier to reach the high notes. I never have a problem up high. I have more of a problem down low. So I'm still singing at 440.
Okay, so low has always been like more difficult for you.
The lower stuff is. It's helped, like I said, since I stopped smoking. All that has come around since I stopped smoking. But still, even my speaking voice, you can hear it. It's up here. It's a head voice. It's not, it's not a chest or a stomach voice.
Yeah. So I have few questions left. And the second last one was that what were like your parents' reactions when they heard that you are becoming a metal singer and you are in a metal band and singing?
I went to Catholic school.
Okay, that's a good way to start that.
1 through 8, 9 through 12, and then in college too. I went to a Catholic school. The whole reason my mother could sing is because she's first generation American. My grandparents were Irish, and it was necessary to fucking sing to be in that family. And my mother loved me and would supported me through anything. It had nothing to do with, you're a metal singer, I don't love you anymore. It had nothing. It was unconditional love. But I remember a funny story. I was married at the time, and it was Dee Dee's birthday. I think it was his 50th birthday. And we had a great big gig in New York. Place called the Sony Theater, the Best Buy Theater. It was about 2,500 people. And my wife said, you got to come and see Bobby, because my parents never saw me. You know, they never saw me play. And I would always tell my father, I'd say, Mom would love this. I mean, this is what Mom did. And I would always invite her. And he's like, listen, I don't want to bring your mother down there. You got a dirty mouth. And I don't want you and your dirty mouth making your mother feel bad. You're her firstborn, and she loves you, and she thinks you're an angel. And I said, okay. So sure enough, they show up. And they can't believe it. We're having this party. There's kids running around. There's pizza. There's beer. There's drinks. My father's like, this is all family. I said, yeah, it's all Dee Dee's family. It's his birthday. Because if I knew it was like this, I would have taken your mother years ago.
So he had quite different thoughts about being a metal band, I guess.
But it was a unique night. You know, I mean, many other nights, this guy's laying on a couch with no socks on it, you know, with puke on your undershirt.
But you didn't tell that part to him.
So my mother gives me a big hug and says, I'm proud of you. And my father whispers in my ear, he goes, please don't use any profanity in front of your mother, right? So I get out on the stage, and we finish the first three. Bang. And I get up to the mic. I could see my mother sitting at the soundboard. And I go, I just want to tell everybody, welcome. It's good to be back in New York City again. And I'd like to tell everybody I have a special guest here. This is the first time my mother's ever seen me. And I promised her and my father I wouldn't use any fucking profanity. I could see her whole face just went as red as a tomato. But she clapped, you know. It was a fun experience.
So I'm about to wrap this up, and the last question goes that, are there like any kind of advice that you would like to give to a young metal vocalist who is just about to start their journey?
Yeah, first and foremost, find your own voice. Use it correctly so you can use it for a lifetime, and find the different places you can put it. A voice can travel from here to the front of your mouth, to the top, to the back, to the chest, to the belly. If you can find that, you can do a lot of things with it that other people who neglect finding it cannot do. If you don't know how to move your voice around inside your head and inside your body, you'll be limited.
Hey, thank you a lot for this interview. It was a very good one.
Brought back a whole bunch of memories.
Yeah, for sure. And thanks a lot for doing this interview with me, and all the best for the release of the upcoming album. Hope to catch you in Finland with the album.
I hope so. Take care.
Take care. Bye.